Hey everyone, in this video I'm breaking down my US No-Pac and Air deck. The one that I played a lot from 1200 to 1500 ELO. I ended up playing only US from 1100 to my peak of 1600 and I'm still using it right now, but I've started experimenting with different aircraft loadouts. A quick note, I didn't upload a gameplay video for my Russian Armour deck because I hit a rough losing streak and ended up reworking the list as a result. It still needs more testing in 1500 lobbies before I revisit it properly. But moving on, this US deck is all about strong infantry backed by air support and just enough armor to keep things flexible. It's a great fit if you enjoy infantry and air focused gameplay but still want access to some armored tools where it's needed. This guide is especially for players who struggle to get value out of infantry or aircraft, both of which are game changers in higher elo matches. I'll walk you through what to bring and, more importantly, why it works for me. I'll also be uploading full gameplay in just a few days with commentary using this exact deck so you can see how it performs in live matches. If that sounds helpful, consider liking and subscribing, and let's jump into this deck. Let's start with the core philosophy behind this deck. The core strategy with this deck is to secure a key point, keep consistent pressure across the map, and deliver well-timed airstrikes that can turn the tide of a game. One thing to keep in mind, this deck does not include long-range AA, that's the no-pack in its name, so it really shines when your teammates can cover that gap with their own support units. Keep your infantry alive. The longer they're in the field, the more value they generate. Your Marine CQC Raiders have 10 armor and a lot of health from their large squad size, making them incredibly effective and pretty durable, but only if you actively manage them. Avoid throwing them into unwinnable fights or leaving them exposed, especially in garrison buildings where enemy vehicles have a long range line of sight on that building. Next is constantly probe and apply pressure. Don't just bunker down. Keep pushing and spreading out. Holding a point isn't enough. You need to contest the surrounding terrain. Once you do, you can build a stronger layered defense that's harder to break, and you can also more easily pressure enemy flanks or perhaps even back points closer to their spawn, which is going to help divert attention away from your teammates. And lastly, using your airstrikes with purpose. Don't launch them just because you can. Pay attention to the tempo of the match. If the map feels quiet, odds are the enemy is prepping for a major armed push, usually in the last third of a phase. A well-timed cluster bomb run can shred that momentum and earn you valuable destruction points. That said, don't sit on your aircraft forever either. If you see an Armada or T-15s putting pressure on your teammate, sending an air support can quickly shift the balance for your teammate on that point, which is just overall going to make that game a lot easier. Now, let's cover the core units that make this deck work. Firstly, it's your small teams, your go-to close-range anti-tank infantry. They are affordable, effective, great for ambushes in urban or forested terrain, and they also carry munitions for infantry. The anti-infantry munition is pretty effective against enemy infantry that is garrisoned or in the open, and it has been pretty useful in that aspect, especially when you have Marines that are out in front of them taking the damage, doing the close range firing, giving them an opportunity to just keep sending those high explosive shells. You do need to keep in mind, though, that their range is pretty poor. They only come in at 400 meters, so they really are for ambushing from tree lines, fighting in forests, or engaging in urban environments. The next infantry unit is your Marines. These are my kind of standard line infantry in this deck. They are versatile with some anti-tank capability. They're best used for screening, holding ground, supporting pushes. They hold their own in buildings and against enemy infantry, so all around they're a pretty solid unit. And the last infantry unit would be the CQC Marine Raiders. These guys are your door kickers. They are strong in close quarters. They have decent AT. They perform better than typical flashbang units like the Deltas or Stormovikis, once outside of a building. I have found CQC Marine Raiders to do a really good job of surviving on the point for much longer than other infantry units would. Keep in mind, the CQC variant gives them an additional 2 armor, taking them up to 10 armor total. And having 10 armor with such a large squad size means they're surviving quite a lot that usually gets thrown at you when you're trying to cap a point, particularly things like cruise missiles or artillery fire. The only vehicle that I feel is really a core for how I play this deck would be your AAVP. The AAVP is a solid transport that brings more than just transporting infantry. They can carry multiple squads, usually one marine and one small or a double small, and they also come with a 50 caliber machine gun and a grenade launcher. This makes them perfect for providing supporting fire during infantry engagement in forests and also when you are sieging buildings. Unfortunately, they are not that durable. They are upgraded, so they have some decent armor, but they're also quite affordable. They're not the most expensive armored troop transport that you can take. I have found them to be pretty useful, and you're not too sad when you lose them. And lastly, the most obvious unit for this deck is going to be our aircraft, particularly our F-15 Eagles. Now, I have 4 Eagles in total. 3 are running cluster munitions, a mix of snake eyes and rock eyes, and the last one carries JDAMs for infantry. Now, I usually like to talk about secondary playstyles for my decks, but when it comes to US decks in general, it's tough to pin down a strict secondary playstyle. They're naturally versatile and multi-role by design. That said, this deck excels on the flanks, where its mobility, strong infantry, and air power can apply constant pressure. And you also have a bit more space micro-wise to use airstrikes on the rest of the map. Alternatively, it is fully capable of taking on a more aggressive frontline, often middle role. Just keep in mind it doesn't field as many main battle tanks as a dedicated armor deck, so sustained head-on brawls might not always be in your favor. Instead, you try to leverage your combined arms and air support to punch holes and exploit weaknesses. Now, I would like to talk a bit about my opener strategy. Playing US almost always means dealing with the air attacks, so I start most games expecting to invest in early air engagements. The next step is to assess where I'll be fighting. When I see a lot of open terrain and long sightlines, and I can expect to hold rather than push, I deploy weapon squads and stingers inside AAVPs. This combo gives solid defense presence and decent survivability. If it is a dense area with buildings or forests and I expect closer range engagements or a more contested initial point, I opt for 2 AAVPs, each loaded with a marine and a small. Both fit inside a single AAVP and they work well together. The Marines have some AT and good anti-infantry. The Smalls have good AT and some anti-infantry. And the AAVP itself chips in with its 50 cal machine gun and grenade launcher, which is going to help suppress enemy infantry and potentially also destroy light vehicles. The next decision I make after this is, am I bringing out my first Shorad or am I bringing a vehicle with stingers? This decision mostly comes down to the availability of buildings for stingers to garrison, or if I feel I'm going to need to be more mobile with my anti-air capabilities. A crucial habit of mine is checking how many armored guard players there are on the enemy team. If I see 3 or more, I'll preemptively call in a cluster loaded eagle very early, even before spotting enemy units, and have it loiter on the back of the map. Chances are at least one of them will open with armadas or some sort of light vehicle spam. And at this early stage, their AA net is still forming or in transit, giving your eagle a window to hit hard with minimal resistance that is often really unexpected. Once the initial fight settles, I focus on locking down my captured point. I deploy force recon to the flanks, I get a sniper team with a clean line of sight. I start to add specialized infantry like my stingers or weapon teams. I also keep AAVPs loaded with infantry in reserve nearby to respond quickly to enemy pushes. Players tend to bring a lot of artillery fire down on a point before they push it, so you really don't want all of your stuff just grouped up in there. An AAVP in a bush nearby loaded up with some infantry is usually going to either stop an assault entirely or delay it long enough for you to react to it. Once I've secured my position, I usually shift into one of two roles depending on how the match is unfolding. The first is focusing on airstrike and helicopter management, carefully timing high impact airstrikes and microing helicopters across the map to make sure they stay alive and keep applying pressure. The second is leaning into probing and pressuring the enemy point. Pushing toward the next point, not necessarily to take it, but to disrupt the enemy's momentum and force them to divert resources away from other fronts. Both approaches help maintain map control and create openings for my team to push up and create a solidified line in an advantageous position. One should remember that pressure is the best defense in this game. The more you force your opponent to react and play defensively, the less initiative they have to coordinate their own attacks. And now I want to quickly go through every unit in my deck as well as their selected loadouts. Starting off with our scout snipers. Every deck needs recon. Snipers are excellent recon. I do not upgrade their sniper rifle kit. I try to keep them as cheap as possible, so that I do not feel too bad when they get found and killed in the back line. I bring them out with two Humvee GMBs. These vehicles are fast and they seat 6, so I can also use them to bring up other units if needed. The next unit is the Force Recon. I bring 4 of these in the Green Ops loadout because I think having the upgraded launcher is definitely worth it in case you run into vehicles in the tree line supporting the enemy infantry. We use them to hold flanks, probe tree lines, and push up ahead of our force to do a bit of forward scouting. Next, our drone of choice is the RQ-4 Global Hawk. It doesn't have the stealth capabilities of the Sentinel, but it does have really good range. I don't use it that often, but if a teammate just had a really good seed run, it's worth it to bring this out and have it a little bit backwards to see any armored pushers trying to sneak up on you. The first unit on my infantry tab would be the Marine Raiders CQC. I have really come to love these units. I run them in their close quarter loadout for that additional bit of armor, bringing them to a total of 10 armor and 70 health for a 14-man unit. It makes them durable. They have grenade launchers, shotguns, and short-range AT. I run these units in this loadout in every Marine deck that I have. The next unit would be my Assault Men Small. This is our close range AT. I usually field all 4 of them all the time. I try to keep them in the fight. They are not as good in an AT role as Ranger Moors, but they can definitely still blow up a Barbarous with some side or rear shots, and they do have the high explosive rockets to help deal with garrisoned infantry. I have them paired with 4 AAVPs using the SU kit upgrade to give it as much armor as possible. Unfortunately, the unit does not have a APS system, but it has 100 armor, it has a smoke, and it only costs 70. It does its job. Next up is the Weapon Squad. I use these the same way I would use an ATGM. They carry 2 javelins, which is very useful for overwhelming the APS. Javelins themselves are pretty good AT rockets. The unit also has 2 rather large light machine guns, which makes them pretty good at not fighting in their building, but potentially pinning infantry that is trying to push up to them. Then we have our Marines with a standard loadout. We use the standard loadout so that they also have AT rockets. This combines really well with the small, as quite often the Marine rockets are overwhelming the APS and then the small rockets are getting in there to deal the damage. The Marines themselves have 8 armor, 65 health, it's a 13-man squad. It makes them quite durable and They deal pretty well with infantry. They've got a lot of grenade launchers, pretty good rifles. I think all around it's a pretty great mainline unit. I have my Marines paired with the ACVP. Now, I bring four of these and I bring them without any upgrades. They are quite fast and they are good at bringing up infantry to reinforce, especially stingers and weapon squads, once I have solidified a safe area for them to move up into. And last for my infantry tab would be the stinger teams. In general, I really like any specialized team that brings two of their weapons. In this case, this team brings up two of the stingers. I think this makes them really effective at fulfilling their role. You just need to keep in mind it's a four-man team. They are not going to be holding their own in pretty much any engagement. Moving on to my vehicles, we have two of the M1A1 FEP trophy tanks. Now, I have the Abrams tank upgraded with the trophy active protection, and I also have the Tusk armor package on it. I don't care much for the side armor provided for the armor package, but it does provide an extra health for the unit, which comes in useful, especially because you only have two MBTs. You want them to be as tank as possible. Next up is the M8 Thunderbolt. I bring four of these with maxed out armor package upgrades as well as the upgraded 120mm gun. This vehicle performs well as long as you keep in mind that it is not an MBT and it cannot take frontal hits the way one can. It does, however, do well at range and traveling in pairs or even as a four-tank pack. They are incredibly deadly to exposed infantry as well as lighter vehicles. You will quite often see higher elo Russian players rely a lot on vehicles like Hornet vehicles or other tow-based vehicles. In that case, the M8 Thunderbolt pack can move up, release a salvo, destroy it, and have the APS negate the return fire. Last for my vehicle tab are two Humvee tows. Now, I'm still experimenting a bit with this unit, trying to find their place. I don't have any upgrades on them. That is mainly to keep them as cheap as possible. I know the armor upgrade is free, but I also want to keep them as fast as possible. And most of the times when they die to ATGMs or enemy tank fire, and that armor was not going to help them anyways. I try to use them to quickly move up to flanks or to cut something off. They've performed well so far. I've also found them to be quite useful at taking shots at infantry garrisoned in buildings. To start off my support tab, I have the Slam Ram. This is the closest thing we have to a pack. I'm running it with 4 AMRAMs as well as 2 AIM-9 missiles. It deals pretty well at aircraft that come too close. It's not going to scare off aircraft entirely, but it will farm some return kills on planes that are coming too close to your forces. It also comes out pretty cheap at 180, and sometimes I'll bring it out right at the opener if I see that the air engagement is leaving a lot of opportunities for return kills on enemy aircraft. Next is the LAV-AD. I have it with the double stinger pods as well as the A2 armor and smoke upgrade. Unfortunately, it's not a traditional SHORAD in the sense that it has radar capabilities to increase its range, but it does fire stingers pretty quickly and it does have a 25mm gun for aircraft that get too close. It performs the role well enough. Our first supply vehicle would be the MTVR. It costs 60 points, it carries 6,000 supply as well as 18 troops. I have more often started to bring troops out with my supply recently. It just feels more optimal and you're using less vehicles, so you're having less points being drained. My other supply vehicle is the LAVL. Now, this is a bit of a recent addition to the deck, and I've been experimenting more with smaller supply vehicles that are much cheaper, that I'm just a lot more willing to risk. The last vehicle in my support tab is the LAVM with Dragonfire. I use this dual purpose for smoke as well as high explosive on entrenched infantry. In a different variation of this deck that I have been trying in the past couple days, I took this out and I added a Smoke Brutus to take over the Smoke role, and I'm still trying to see what exactly I prefer there, but for most of the time I have been using the LAVM Dragonfire. To start off my helicopter tab, I have the AH-1Z Viper. I am using the Hellfire AT missiles on the inner pylons. I leave the outer pylons empty to try and bring the cost down. And on the wingtips, I bring the AGM-122 anti-radiation missile. This is because every game the Russians will bring out tons of Tors and Pansirs. If you have multiple Vipers traveling in a pack, there's a good chance that the anti-radiation missiles will be able to take out a couple of these SHORADs, or at least provide you enough time as it distracts them to drop altitude and get out of there. The next helicopter is the Kiowa Warrior. I run it with dual stingers as well as the upgraded optronics system. In a different variation of the deck, I dropped the optronics system just to keep it cheaper because I feel like I'm quite often trading my Kiowas for an enemy helicopter, and I was just trying to make that trade as efficient as possible. But there have been times when that increased range from the optronics system has been incredibly useful for spotting helicopters trying to come up on my flanks. I always bring at least one larger transport helicopter to reinforce or put down supply dumps in the back for teammates, and for this deck it is the Shinhook, 12,500 carry capacity, 32 seats, very good helicopter for this purpose. My attack helicopter is the AH-64D Apache. I have nothing on the outer pylons and I have 8 Hellfire AT missiles on the inner pylons. I stripped this helicopter of a lot of upgrades, and in general that's something I do with my attack helicopters. I feel that Russian SHORAD in the game is just too strong at the moment to really allow you to invest into helicopters. There's a good chance it is just going to get 2 or 3 shot from multiple SHORADs the moment it fires. So you want it to be as cheap as possible so that I can hopefully at least trade evenly. Moving on to my aircraft, this is where most of my experimenting has been happening the past few days, but I thought I should give the variation of this deck that I was using the most up until this point, and in that variation, the F-35B with double AMRAAMs has been my standard fighter aircraft. Now, it does not have any ability to shoot down helicopters, nor does it have a machine gun of any kind, but it is very cheap, coming in at 265 points. It is stealth, 20% ECM, and the 4 AMRAAMs that it comes with makes it effective enough for air attacks. Next is the F-15E Strike Eagle. This is the plane I bring the most of in this deck. I bring out 3 of them with a cluster loadout. I feel that it is the best cluster carrying aircraft in the game, the best low drag explosive aircraft in general. And the configuration I have for it is 6 CBU 87,000 pounds on the center line, 4 of them on the fuselage, 8 MK82 Snake Eyes on the wings, the cheapest missile option for the wing pylons, and no designation pod to keep it a bit cheaper. The CBU cluster 1,000 pounds are very good against armadas as well as heavily armored Russian vehicles. The 8 Snake Eyes are in there because they do okay against vehicles and they do pretty well against infantry. So they deal a good bit of damage to infantry that get dismounted due to the cluster, and it also helps a lot when you are just doing a bombing run on a tree line that has a T-15 Barbarous supporting infantry, for example. You get a fair amount of damage on them both. You most likely end up killing them both, and sometimes you really do just need to bring out a strike against the infantry. And in that case, the Snake Eyes perform well enough that you can do that in an emergency. Next up is the F-15EX Eagle 2. Now, in a variation of this deck, this is my fighter aircraft carrying just a silly amount of AMRAAMs, but in this configuration, I have it running as many 500-pound JDAMs as possible. It has the cheapest outer pylon option available, which is, well, 4 AMRAMs, and it has no designation pod. Now, JDAMs need the aircraft to rise before they can drop it. It is not a high drag munition, so it needs a bit of micromanagement to go in low, drop the JDAMs, drop and get out without losing the plane. I only bring one of them because I'm not doing it that often, but being able to drop 11 500-pound JDAMs on a point that's just full of infantry has been really good at just softening those positions or sometimes just completely clearing out a point. Lastly, I have two EA-6B Prowlers with as many harm as they can carry. These are very good seed aircraft. They're very affordable. Seed doesn't need that much explaining. You bring out seed to target their anti-aircraft, to target their SHORADs. Quite often, I will start bringing out a lot of prowlers if I am in a position where I am using helicopters to support my teammates. I use my helicopters to reveal themselves, and then as soon as those SHORADs all turn on their radars, I have a prowler loitering nearby to hopefully punish them for it. That wraps up the breakdown of my US No-Pac Air deck. A solid choice if you're looking to dive deeper into infantry and air focus gameplay without giving up all of your flexibility. I've got a couple of solid matches using this exact build, and I'll be uploading one soon with full commentary. I'll walk through what went right, what didn't, and highlight some of the key tactics I found effective so you can see it all in action. If you found this helpful or want to see more guides like this, consider liking the video and subscribing. And if you have any aircraft loadouts that you feel are underutilized, let me know in the comments because I'm doing some experimenting there and I'm very interested in seeing what everyone else is doing. But that's about it. Thank you for watching and I hope to see you in game soon with Cluster Eagles.